You've got a lot of interest in this industry. The number of folks who are working with private equity and other outside investors, I have to say it's astounding.
It's a fragmented industry, and that takes a different approach than traditional private equity.
The largest paradigm shifting changes over the next handful of years will be due to this aggregation and breaking of normal regional barriers in manufacturing. Today, I think that sheet metal in particular is way more accessible than it ever has been.
Welcome to the Next-Gen Metal Fab podcast. I'm your host, Tim Heston. In each episode, I'll be joined by a rotation of co-hosts, Caleb Chamberlain from Oshkosh, Cody Lee from Everyday Technologies, and Lance Thrakill from All Metals Fabricating. Together, we'll talk about what the future could look like for precision sheet metal and tube fabrication.
Hey, Cody Lee of Everyday Technologies here. Before we get back to the episode, I just wanted to say a quick word about what I believe is the industry's leading quoting and collaboration software, Paperless Parts. It helps my shop and hundreds more across North America simplify every step of the quoting process in one secure platform. With patented technology and automated costing logic built around how we work, we're able to turn RFQs quickly and accurately. It's easy to train new team members, and with ERP integration, we avoid rework after winning a job. It gives us better visibility into our pipeline and margins and helps us deliver a fast, more polished experience to our customer. And beyond the software, the Paperless Parts team has been a true partner, responsive, and genuinely invested in our success. Visit paperlessparts.com to see why we rely on it every day.
Hi, this is Tim Heston, Senior Editor at the Fabricator Magazine at FMA, and thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Next-Gen Metal Fab podcast. This time around, I am joined by Lance Thrakill at All Metals Fabricating down in Texas, and we've got Caleb Chamberlain at Oshkosh over in Utah. How are you guys doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Pretty good. Thanks, Tim.
It is several weeks after FABTECH, and just kind of getting the hindsight of the show, of what went down. It was the largest FABTECH in history, exhibit space-wise. We had over 40,000 attendees, almost record-breaking attendees. 2019 is still a record-breaking year, but 2025 was close on its heels, so it just says something of the fact that, there's all sorts of worries in the market as far as, where the economy is headed, all sorts of, trade policy concerns among various sectors of the economy, but at least in metal fabrication, full steam ahead, and a lot of optimism abounded at the show. So yeah, Lance, so you were at the show. What were you looking for, and what was your sense? Kind of give me your impressions.
So yeah, we went there really looking at software. We're looking at programming software and ERP solutions. Also wanted to check out different cutting and cut to bend solutions, but was primarily there for software. But yeah, the overall takeaway I had was, it was I called it like year of the robots and cobots. I mean, it was just like there was robots and cobots everywhere. Was really cool to see. Pretty eye-opening how many laser companies there are. I mean, it's just like there's so many people manufacturing lasers. It's crazy. It was just like everywhere you look, there was a laser. So that was just just impressive at how diversified that market is, and eye-opening. And then another, just on the software side, how many are trying to do it all? So it seems like even as you look through the exhibitor list, it's like you look at programming software also shows up as a MES also, which not as surprising, but then also like an ERP. That muddies the water a little bit. Like we were looking for scheduling focus and ERP and programming, and it was like all of them were like, yeah, we can do it all. And it's like, yeah, but what do you do really, really well? It's kind of this: are you a jack of all trades or a master of one? And that's kind of what I've expressed to some of them. It's like, I worry that you're too focused on too many things, that to really be really excellent and the best at one. Was just a but it's also encouraging to see like them all moving towards offering one solution for everything. But yeah, those are just kind of some broad general takeaways. We were also looking at just material storage as well. Was found some good, some cool material storage solutions. Everything from PEM nuts to sheets. Really liked what we saw there on the material storage. Some more affordable solutions for automated material storage. Really exciting.
During my reporting, I, went all over the conference as well, and so there was one presentation there from Level Up Consulting. I have a contact there, which is an ERP consulting firm, and he has years of experience in the industry with various ERP vendors, and now he's doing his one of the guys there is doing their doctoral dissertation, which actually we'll be covering in the magazine. But he has a contact in the industry that is doing some research, and we'll be covering it in the magazine. It's very interesting about vibe coding ERP, which basically is you say, please write me a scheduling software that handles these types of jobs and put together a Gantt chart for me. And they showed it on the screen, and boom, it was created. And it's both basically custom vibe coding of ERP and just be basically build your own. It gives you a bunch of Lego blocks, and here it is. My contact there was saying this is basically the future. That basically you're going to have a modularized platform. ERP is a legacy name. It's basically just enterprise software. We're just going to call it enterprise software that's going to touch every part of your business, which is why you would kind of notice that around the floor where ERP is no longer ERP. It's, it's manufacturing execution systems. It's down to programming and simulation. There were a few simulation companies that were trying to also get into quoting, and I know a lot of the quoting providers are trying to develop ecosystems, et cetera. But it's this kind of openness that is being forced upon them because of this vibe coding and AI and the AI assisted programming. It's just amazing. It's like, oh, it just created a scheduling program. All right, let's see how it works. And that'll be the true test is let's see how it works. And Caleb, I'm sure you have comments on that. I'm not sure what.
Yeah.
So let's backtrack though, Caleb. You mentioned your team. What was their impressions and what were they looking for?
They we didn't have anything specific to look for, but they did come back pretty excited about laser welding. They said, "Yeah, we actually did it. We welded some metal together, and it was remarkably easy, and the welds look remarkably good." So, kind of interesting. We might tinker with it a little bit and see what we can do with it.
Actually, during the show, we did have the keynote was a laser safety specialist. So we had that was made for a purpose because previous shows we've had issues with that where we want to make sure your enclosure, you have a light tight or light safe enclosure. That is an issue with hand laser welding, but you can overcome it with the right enclosures and the right talk of safety. And the productivity is just so amazing. And it's almost easier with folks who have never picked up a TIG torch. If you try to laser weld and you're an experienced TIG welder, it's very difficult because you just have to put it down and let the whole thing guide you back. It's almost like a drawdown. It's like, all right, there it is. The wire feed's going to guide you. But if you try to actually manipulate it like an experienced TIG welder would do, you're going to be fighting it all the way. So that's what they came back with. You're kind of tinkering with laser welding, thinking how it's going to affect your business, and just kind of back up further. How's business for you, Caleb, overall, and what's your opinion of what I saw at FABTECH, that kind of vibe coding business software? It's very interesting.
So, to your first question, business is good. We're seeing very abnormal growth. And when I say abnormal, what I mean is faster than at any time in our entire 7-year history. And it's both good and a little alarming from oh man, can we keep up with this kind of a perspective? And then simultaneously, we had 2 of our 4 lasers down, flatbed lasers down for 2 weeks. And that was rough. And now our tube lasers down. So, there's always equipment down, unfortunately. You talk about cobots and stuff at FABTECH, and my first thought is, man, that's just more stuff that's going to break down. The more automation you have, the more likely you are to stop dead in your tracks because you can't do anything without it, and things always break.
And the more dependent you are on it.
Yeah, that's right. And then, yeah, that's my take on humanoid robotics too. There probably wasn't much of that at FABTECH. FABTECH is way too practical for that kind of stuff. But yeah, the idea of putting a robot with 60 degrees of freedom or something absurd like that on the floor is just a non-starter for me. From the software perspective, I think you're probably right. I'm not sure exactly what it's going to look like, but I think large language models are going to revolutionize how software is developed. And if I were a B2B SaaS company, I would be very worried about it, about the longevity of my business, because I think there's a lot of stuff that might happen to just like totally commoditize all of that and give people the ability to make the perfect software in-house.
Like you did.
Yeah, perfect for me, imperfect for everybody else, for sure.
But that's a key point, is that, that's what I saw in this kind of, in enterprise software, vibe coding, AI-driven modules where you get to build it and use it and then refine it over time. And I remember, well, that's similar to what you did, Caleb. When you launched it, then people from the floor said, "Hey, can you do this?" And you went and coded it. But this is kind of automating that aspect. You've got certain code, certain base level software that's mission critical that you would never want to do this with. To your point, Lance, cobots, yeah, we're everywhere at the show. And I was kind of most impressed with some of the multifunction cobots there, where you could put a laser welder, a handheld laser welder on a cobot, and then switch it out with a TIG or MIG or even, process, and just kind of a multifunction tool, and even a cutting torch, let's say. And the nice thing about those too is that you mentioned that automation breaks down. Well, yeah. So in these circumstances, the automation, the cobot, if the cobot can't do something or some mishap happens, you can rejigger the cell and move in there and do it manually and keep the process going. The issue is finding the resources and people to do that. 'Cause the whole point of getting the cobot is you don't have the people.
Yeah, the cobots are much better solution than robots because of the, ease of being able to program, and then also, if it's not working, just manually intervene, so I mean, I said after leaving, I foresee in the next few years, like a future where every person here is running a couple cobots, and the cobots are running each machine, and that I think that's in the very near future.
Right. And another trend I saw at the show, and we're going to shift gears here, but I had a lot of folks working with investors talk to me at the show. Just obviously my name and my face is in the magazine, and I'm kind of known in the industry. So if I sit in the booth, people come over and they talk to me, and the number of folks who are working with private equity and other outside investors, family offices, looking at this industry, I have to say it's astounding. You've got a lot of interest in this industry.
I get an email a week. I get an email and a call a week at
Me
least.
too. Drives me crazy.
And it makes sense. I see why. I mean, it's a fragmented industry with a lot of boomers that don't have an exit plan, and their kids didn't come in, and it's too late for them to kind of come in, and they're operators in their business, so they're too busy to really be thinking exit strategy and building their business in a way that works for them, instead of them, they're working in the business instead of on the business. And so the challenge for private equity, I think, is that the nuance inside of manufacturing. I think it's really great for small mid-market private equity groups. I mean, but if you're the private equity company acquiring the business, like, you got to get in it. You've got to understand the culture. You've got to know the people. You can't. It's not traditional private equity where you just bring the business to get the people to get more out of the business as it is. It's not that simple. There's skilled labor involved. There's culture involved. There's nuance involved, and so you got to get really in the business, and that takes a different approach than traditional private equity. But the opportunity is there. I mean, it is massive. It's everywhere.
I've actually covered a few what I call family office stories. The key is to take that owner who is giving up the reins, but also keep that management in place and the people and the relationships there. Turnaround stories often don't end well if they're trying to, totally rehash a business. There were some underlying problems to begin with, and that's why they could get the get the business for cheap, right? It's like, no, if there are underlying problems, new ownership is not necessarily gonna fix that problem.
I'm sure there's great private equity firms that are good at manufacturing and that have that are patient capital, that know how to reinvest. But I think, and I could be wrong about this, but I think that the vast majority of private equity companies are really interested in paper gains and financial engineering and not improving manufacturing for its own sake. And the reason that scares me is that there's a bunch of ways that you get paper value by rolling up manufacturing companies, and in the process, you can show great paper returns and ruin the business. There's EBITDA multiple arbitrage. There's leverage recapitalization. Um, you know, debt push down, tax shielding, and all this. There's just a bajillion tricks they pull, and they all know the game. So they've got a pile of money, and they say, "Well, I can buy these three manufacturers, and by virtue of their collective EBITDA being above $5 million now, I can command a higher EBITDA multiple because it's way more interesting, and sell into a different market." And there's just a bunch of stuff like that. Like, it doesn't have any impact on the actual value being produced. And so when I get all these like cold emails from private equity groups that are like, "Hey, you want to sell your business?" I'm like, "You know nothing about my business." Uh, and I feel like we're doing some really exciting things, and I'm in it for the next 30 years. I had to continue pushing on this front, and all these financial wizards with a big pile of cash are just looking to leverage this thing that I've built to make a bunch of money. Makes me so mad. Maybe it shouldn't, but it makes me mad.
No, yeah, you're spot on there. I mean, ultimately, part of my big picture vision is putting together a fund that goes up and acquires other manufacturing verticals to horizontally integrate, and legacy companies that are successful where the boomer just doesn't, and not to just put that blanket topic on that, but the owner does not have a good exit plan, and you could benefit from a platform business, and you pass business over to one another, kind of similar to the Bob Chapman model with Barry Waymiller, what he did there. And so yeah, that's where it works, not with the financial tricks of private equity and squeezing people for more. And yeah, that will not be good for manufacturing.
I'm sure there's great stuff that happens along with the notorious stuff.
And just from the outright, not necessarily financial wizardry, et cetera, but if we just look at EBITDA and returns, like for instance, the AccuFab transaction that happened with MEC earlier this year, and that's an interesting transaction because it's public. It's a public company, so you can actually go into the 8K and 10Ks and look at the returns, and you can see AccuFab, because is so deep into data centers, the profits were just enormous, so they grew they grew 5 times between 2023 and 2024. They quintupled profits,
Wow.
and so it was just amazing. And the fact that MEC bought them and said, "Listen, we are going to dilute that and actually have a revenue pie that is much more um, diversified versus all in data center, all on the hot industry now. That's going to be hot for the next couple of years for sure." And I'm sure that's why they didn't want to leave money on the table. But then the underlying investment and strategic plan is to have that diversified revenue model, saying, "Listen, this is the hot industry that's going to be here for a while, but it's a ride now, but it's not going to be around forever. We've been here before, the telecom bubble, all sorts of bubbles in the past. We don't want to just, be solely 80% of our business on this. We want to diversify." And so that story is great. I love to hear that. And when I hear as you mentioned, Lance, the platform company approach where they try to do that to diversify in the long game, that makes sense. I mean, to be honest, just to buy an underperforming firm that perhaps has, that's quote unquote, they look at it as a simple business and they could roll it up and make a ton of money. Then they dive deep into it and go, "Wait a minute, this isn't a simple business. I just realized this."
It is the opposite.
It is the opposite. In fact, that's why I would argue the industry is still so fragmented, because of the complexity that lies within the job shop production model. And that, it's not easy. And that's another challenge, is the scaling up of these businesses. You've got a lot of these platform companies, a dozen ERP systems operating under one company, because it's so hard to merge the entire platform. So they just keep it separate. That's just interesting. It's an interesting trend.
I won't name names, but A big initial initiative was let's get everybody on the same ERP, and then a year later it was like, no, let's leave everybody on their own ERPs. I think it's just an enormous problem. It's software that just permeates an organization, and even an organization's culture and operations. So switching ERPs is not like just, you know, flipping a switch and changing software vendors.
Right, right. But the core of the issue too is when you get down to it, it's just the granular aspects of the data that makes it so difficult, right? So like you have people who have keyed in stainless steel 304 as SS 304 or stainless 304, and it's keyed in slightly different ways. Am I wrong about this? As far as that's what makes the integration so difficult.
Well, I have never managed an ERP migration, thank goodness. Um, I I have probably another decade of life left to me just because I didn't do that. Saved me a few
So
gray hairs.
I mean, I've seen a change in tone from vendors just in this year, just in the last 6 months of like, "Oh, yeah, like 6 months ago, that was a huge problem and pain point," to now, like, them saying, "Yeah, we can do that. We can migrate all your data if you want to." I think AI is gonna help solve a lot of the data migration, but still there'll be cleanup because of even just within how you, systematically, like, when you start, you're not thinking, "I need to make every field built the exact same way across every different material," and and if you got different naming conventions and different ways, if you have the don't have the thickness and the exact same spaces between each one, all that causes complexity as you look to automate and integrate, yeah, but I think they're solving for a lot of that with AI.
I think that'll help a lot of headaches down the road. Caleb, what was getting back to FabTech? What did your team come back with besides laser welding? Was that the main thing, or were there other things on the list saying, all right, these may be on our list down the road?
Oh, we're always keeping our eyes open for new technologies and ways to broaden our capabilities. So there's a laundry list of things where it was like, yeah, that would be cool if we added that. But laser welding is, I think, actually the team got one on order, so we're gonna start tinkering with that and see if it's something that we can put wheels on.
Are you talking about hand laser welding, or are you thinking of automating that process?
Yep.
Yeah, I can see that because it's such a repeatable process.
And you guys don't do any welding right now, right, Caleb?
We are piloting a welding service for our top customers right now. So it's off system, meaning we do some manual bidding and manually build the bill of materials so that it includes a welding operation. But yeah, we we are kind of easing into it to see what we can do and see what we can automate. So
Well, Tim nailed it with the key is having. I would put somebody that's all they do. They're not even a welder. Like they're somebody or they're an entry level welder that doesn't have, because I mean I never was able to successfully implement laser welding here. And I broke my golden rule of getting buy-in before I bought it, and I was like, yeah, this thing's 15, 20. I left FabTech like 3 years ago and bought one, and that was when IPG released it at that FabTech, and they had no support infrastructure to back to back them up, and so we couldn't get any support on it and training on it, and just kind of lost momentum. But even now, as we've tried to brought in training and revisited it, it's like these welders and our people are all like bonused and paid and graded on their efficiency, and so to think that they're going to want to try anything different, the way they built this repeat production job the same way every time and know that they can meet or beat the time, to then try to do something different, it goes against kind of the DNA and culture that we've built a little bit. So we're to the point where it's like we got to hire somebody that's their only welding machine, and they may not even be a welder, and just that's the way to implement it. But the fact that you got your team's buy-in should make it successful, because I think I mean, even I laid down a perfect bead with that thing. So, and I had never welded before. So, it's pretty sweet.
yeah, if we can weld seams and then not have to grind them, that's pretty awesome.
Yep.
Oh yeah, that's huge, and another interesting aspect at the show that I saw that it's been at the at shows several shows thus far is the fact of the programless robots where they look at a weld and weld basically. And the biggest thing I saw from those are especially the ability of not having to elaborately fixture. So you can just toggle clamp something down, and it looks at the weld and starts to weld. And
Wow.
it needs a CAD program at present. Some certain aspects it doesn't need a CAD program, but that kind of intelligence where you just can just look at a weld and start to weld is pretty impressive. It hasn't permeated the industry everywhere, but the fact it simulates and then does a real-time digital twin, there's potential there. I mean, most shops I go to, if they do robotic welding, if it's a job shop, they have just rows and rows and rows of fixtures. You know, the robot can be flexible, but you know, you can swap out a fixture pretty quickly and reset and go, and so you can do high mix production. But you still need space for all those fixtures. So to simplify that, I thought that was interesting. But it's a matter of time too, because it does take time to look at the thing, and the cycle time's a little slower. So it's a matter of where it fits to the big picture.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I love to see the new technology evolving because, I mean, just the nature of my business today, it just wouldn't be possible if we were, cutting on plasma tables and um, or just really old technology. The existence of CNC equipment, the existence of the ability to offline program and the web-enabled ecosystem, you kind of sum all that up, and it lets you do some really interesting things. So when you see the welding area also evolving, it's kind of a hint that we're going to see businesses create all new models based on what that technology allows you to do.
Yeah, and overall welding, even I mean, every robot I saw there had more simplified. I didn't see teach pendants anywhere. I mean, I mean, I saw teach pendants somewhere, but teach pendants were a rarity. They were much more advanced and you know, point and click, you know, that kind of programming has kind of evolved from cobots to traditional robots. But you mentioned also plasma, like plasma cutting. You know, that's where I see is very, very interesting is the markets between plasma cutting and high powered laser cutting, where you had some extraordinarily high powered lasers on the floor at FabTech, and to see where that market is going to head. You know, plasma cutting still creates that mirror, that very smooth edge. So if you have a cosmetic edge and a very, very nice plasma cutter, that's still gonna, you know, because if you don't want striations, let's say, of a thick plate. But high-powered laser cutting, it's like if you want something that's very accurate and very stable with no taper in your plasma cut in the plate fabrication world, it's going to be an interesting time because it's really changing, especially for beveling. You got beveling lasers, and you know, do a perfect fit up of a plate that's, you know, three-quarter inch plate, no grinding required. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I was blown away by the laser power. I mean, it was just they were cutting through, I think, like 4 and 6 inch material. I mean, I don't know the applications. It's not in my world, but it was cool to see.
Yeah, you guys are in the sheet metal world, so it's a little different, but it's interesting to see too, because seeing that, and we've talked about this in business models, our business model discussion is, you know, I kept thinking, okay, you have these very high powered lasers. Who's going to be doing the laser cutting in the coming years? You know, as far as vertical integration, and you know how, you know, and Caleb, you've written about this in the magazine, where you know if you have a job that is a very high volume job, but you know a service center might be bidding against you on that job, and it's just the reality. It's like, and everybody knows it happens. It's a reality, and even service centers are actually looking to expand and to buy, you know, buy downstream, so to speak, to add more values, to collaborate and create synergies. And and the competitive environment is such, and the machine tool environment is such, is like it just makes sense because you have, you know, the cap. It's hard. It's hard to launch a, launch a fab shop these days with the latest equipment without an incredible amount of capex. so so I don't know what you guys have thoughts on that. If you were a 22-year-old and just starting in this field, I mean, what technology would you head for?
That's a great question. I mean, I didn't have any capital at 22. I couldn't have bought a laser. But there's something really interesting happening right now, I think, and of course I'm going to go here because that's what my business is doing. But I think there's opportunity to aggregate a whole bunch of scale by grabbing the long tail of work that's kind of uninteresting to most shops, and and then taking advantage of those economies of scale to make it really economical. So a 22-year-old who wants to start a fabrication business could today or in the near future just sidestep the requirement of buying a laser altogether and rely on a new ecosystem of just on demand, cost effective parts that they can just get in any quantity without any fuss. I think the largest paradigm shifting changes that happen over the next handful of years will be due to this kind of aggregation and breaking of normal regional barriers in manufacturing.
See, that's a huge point, and we've talked about this before, and I think that would dovetail into that kind of new kind of entrepreneur where instead of I'm going to focus on, say, I'm a plasma cutting shop, I'm going to start and get a plasma cutting table, and that's how I'm going to launch. No, instead, I'm going to focus on certain kinds of custom assemblies that this niche of products needs. Like there's a great shop in Arizona I covered where they focus on material handling requirements for the certain kind of, I believe it's mining industry, um, but certain kinds of industries that need these very complex material handling systems to go from one station to another. So they serve a very narrow niche of manufacturing, of process manufacturing, and they build these custom material handling systems. And it's basically a job shop, but they source out the cutting and they source out because it's so high mix and high touch, but they go very deep into that one niche or several niches. And that's how they grow their business. And will they ever scale up? The entrepreneur I talked to says he doesn't want to scale up. He actually came from a larger manufacturer. He wants to stay small. But how he's going to stay small is to dominate this very small niche that requires a lot of high touch service. And I'd say that that would be an interesting career path for folks these days to really focus on these niches and go deeper and deeper into those verticals.
There's thousands of those niches, the little product categories that require a lot more than just like custom blanking and bending. And so if you can carve out expertise and solve pain in that industry, then awesome, you can scale into that. And niches can be pretty big. You say a small niche, but I mean, uh, in today's world, $100 million is a small niche. So there's a lot of opportunity out there, I think, for people who want to work that way. And today, I think that sheet metal in particular is way more accessible than it ever has been, and that's pretty exciting. We've got thousands of customers who base their business on the ability to just like buy whatever and get it really fast, and not have to worry about $1 million of capex.
Right, right.
Yeah,
And at the other end of the spectrum are those markets for disruption, very, very narrow markets for disruption. I have a conversation with your neighbor, Caleb, coming up pretty soon. Not a wheelchair. Sounds like a great guy. I can't wait to talk to him. And hopefully we'll get a visit or article together. But as you mentioned, he built an entire front end, right, of the business that you could order a wheelchair and then have it, manufactured
yeah.
almost immediately.
In a couple weeks for $1,000 bucks. And you compare that to the ecosystem now for getting wheelchairs made, it's way better. It's so cool what you can do when you just like start from scratch and say, I'm going to solve this problem from first principles with whatever technology is available today, and just eliminate all the existing infrastructure and bureaucratic layers and insurance and all that stuff. And all of a sudden, wow, you can crank out wheelchairs for $1,000 bucks a pop. That's awesome.
Right.
Really cool.
Yeah. And that differs from I just talked to recently for another article at the other end of the spectrum is fabulous. I talked to this guy with 65 years of experience in the industry. He got into the industry in 1960. So he's in his 90s. He's still chugging along. But he started with the tape. He started, with punch tape,
That's
feeding the
awesome.
machines with old wo with old style kick presses and then but and that's the one thing that's probably going to not change, which I think, and again, as you mentioned, these investors and roll-ups kind of miss is his long-term relationship. after 65 years, he said, it's still a people business. It's like you just and it has to be the people within your organization. He had people within his organization that's been there for 40, 50 years, some of them. It's incredible. But had longtime customer relationships, which kept him steady. The customer relationships might change, but the personal relationships between folks in the industry won't. And I think that'll stay that'll stay the course. So yeah, just to close things out here, we've been chatting for a while, but Lance, what are you looking for at next year's FabTech? That'll be a fun way to close. What are you looking for?
Man, well, it'll just be cool to continue to see how, cobots and robotic welding. I mean, that's, it's easy to sell things on a demo, right? They'll be like, yeah, you don't need, and that's like, you don't need any fixtures. You just clamp these things together. And, but I believe that, hearing from you and the advances that are being made, and we saw that even early on with, robotic bending, where it was sounded great for job shops, but it was you had the high mix just didn't work, and we've seen that evolve. And so I'm excited to see, continued improvements in welding, and automation of welding, because um, up until this point, it still really has been very labor intensive in terms of fixturing. I think laser welding is a key to laser welding, and cobots are a key to making that more accessible. I mean, there's skilled way, especially in a precision fab shop like ours. I mean, we don't you can't just have an entry level welder come in and weld these precision parts, but when you start introducing these new technologies and making that accessible to, somebody that just got out of welding school, be able to come in and not have to go get experience, and a higher, a lower tolerance rather, environment. It's very exciting, and so I look forward to that, continuing to evolve and improve, and become more accessible and more user friendly, and more applicable in a high mix job shop environment. I think that's key, because welders, is a very skilled trade, and the price of welders is getting driven up significantly. It has been for a while now. And so the more technology helps solve that problem, I think the better for manufacturing in general.
Yeah, and Caleb, just to close it out with you, Lance attended FabTech, your team attended FabTech. They obviously looked at laser welding, but you being so close to software, with the software advances I witnessed at FabTech, which were kind of just starting to emerge at some of these players. Where do you see software going in this industry in the next 3 to 5 years? Just your thoughts.
That's a good question. I think we'll definitely see it used more. I love to see software used to develop customer facing solutions that make the customer experience better and faster and more streamlined. And that could be a customer of a shop, or it could be the customer being your own employees, like their lives get easier. Um, I've talked before about how some of the critical path to actually getting AI to work in a manufacturing environment is all the scaffolding around it. Tim, earlier you talked about modularization, where you can create modules using AI and then plug them into an existing system, and then they interoperate and do things. And that sounds to me a lot like scaffolding, that enables just anyone to go in and conversationally write code to solve a problem. I would love to see that happen more. Um, I'm not sure how that would fit into my business. In fact, it might remove some of the competitive edge of my business, to be honest, because we have this incredible software, but we spend $1 million a year on software development. Um, so like, if anybody can just walk up to a computer and talk to it and have a solution, then we've got an awful lot of R&D invested in a system that may not translate well to that. So anyway, we'll see how it all goes. I'm excited to see how it plays out.
There's always new ways to apply it, new ways to plug it in, and this industry always is never a straight line. I tell you that, especially with technology evolving. And and I always say that my job was at least past 20 years covering the industry. I can't tell you how many times I've seen technology that I said, "Oh, this is going to change everything," and you know what? Things not have evolved but not been revolutionized, so it's there's always it's a big market, and yeah, adoption varies and success varies, so who knows what we will see within the next 3 to 5 years. But I think that's a good, I think building a scaffolding is a good way to put it. So with that, thank you so much for joining us for this edition of Next Gen Metal Fab podcast, and we'll catch you next time.
The Next-Gen Metal Fab podcast is a production of Fabricators and Manufacturers Association and part of the FMA Podcast Network. The show is hosted by Tim Heston and Caleb Chamberlain. The podcast is produced and edited by Garrett Slager and Dana Weicker. Additional production support by Dan Davis, Andy Flando, Mike Owens, Billy Culpa, Elizabeth Gavin, and me, Sarah Spring. Thank you for listening.
You know nothing about my business.